Why did the laughter stop the moment she stepped off the bus? The Nevada heat pressed down like a physical weight, flattening sound, patience, and kindness alike. Dust clung to everything: the razor wire, the hangars, the boots of young Marines packing the gate. When Alina Cross descended from the transport, no one announced her arrival. No escort, no rank insignia, just a woman in plain clothes, a worn duffel over one shoulder, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone used to being unseen. The guards noticed her scars before they noticed her eyes. Silvery lines mapped her forearms, pale against sun-darkened skin. Old wounds, too many, too deliberate to be random. A thin white scar split her left eyebrow, giving her a look that hovered between focus and fatigue. The laughter came easily. It always did. "She lose a fight with a lawn mower," one corporal muttered. "Cheese grater," the other added, smirking. Alina heard them. She always heard everything. But she didn't react. Her face stayed still, unreadable. Dignity wasn't something she displayed, it was something she carried. She handed over her papers: official letterhead, vague language, technical consultant, a title designed to minimize questions and maximize distance. The guard's amusement cooled when he saw the signatures. Authority had a way of doing that. He waved her through. She walked onto the base like a ghost, passing through a world that had already decided she didn't matter. Colonel Richards decided that too. He studied her from behind a polished desk, eyes flicking to her scars, then back to the insultingly thin personnel file. Consultants annoyed him, civilian ones even more. "You're light on details, Miss Cross," he said. "We run serious operations here." "Diagnostics," she replied calmly. "Systems integration." No elaboration, no apology. Richards assigned her to a failing drone squadron without ceremony, a place to observe, to sit quietly, to stay out of the way. That suited Alina just fine. The hangar was loud, chaotic, full of confidence that hadn't yet been tested by failure. She was given a small desk in a corner, forgotten, ignored, exactly where she worked best. But beneath her calm, something old stirred. She had hoped this life was behind her. She had hoped scars could stay silent forever. She was wrong. What happens when the system collapses faster than anyone expects? The exercise began like all the others, clean, controlled, rehearsed to perfection. Screens glowed with pristine drone feeds. Colonel Richards stood tall, confidence sharpened by the presence of General Hayes behind him. Promotions lived and died in moments like this. Alina watched from her corner, eyes flicking across secondary data streams no one else bothered to monitor. She saw it before the alarm sounded. An anomaly, a rhythm that didn't belong. 18 seconds. That's all she had before everything unraveled. The first screen went dark, then another. Red error codes cascaded like blood down the monitors. Voices rose, hands shook. The room dissolved into noise and panic. Alina didn't move. Fear was loud, focus was quiet. She stood only when the chaos reached its peak. "I can fix it." Her voice cut through the room, not loud, not forceful, just certain. Someone tried to stop her. She didn't slow down. At the console, her hands moved like memory had taken over. She wasn't diagnosing anymore. She was hunting, diving into raw architecture, finding the ghost code hiding where it shouldn't exist. She trapped it, studied it, redirected the entire network through pathways older, stronger, less vulnerable. 4 minutes later, the feeds returned. Silence followed. Not awe, not celebration. Shock. Alina exhaled slowly. Relief flickered inside her, then faded. Fixing broken systems was easy. Facing what came next never was. She returned to her corner. The room watched her now, differently. But respect, she knew, was fragile. And legends never stayed buried forever. Why did the general freeze when he saw her wrist? The second electronic assault came harder, smarter. This time the squadron turned to Alina without hesitation. Even Richard's voice changed, stripped of pride, edged with need. She gave them the solution, calm, precise, no ego. Then General Hayes approached. He saw the scars, then the tattoo. A single black raven's wing, etched into damaged skin. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. "Phantom," he whispered. The room stilled. That name wasn't in any file. It wasn't supposed to exist. A ghost operator. A woman listed KIA years ago after a mission no one spoke about without lowering their voice. The scars weren't accidents. They were survival. The general saluted her, not as a superior but as a peer. One by one, the room followed. Alina didn't smile. She nodded once. Acceptance, not pride. Because pride had cost her everything once. And she wouldn't let it again. Why do legends choose to disappear instead of staying? Alina left the same way she arrived, quietly. No speeches, no awards, just changed people standing in her wake. A young corporal thanked her, not for the legend, for the lesson. She told him to take care of the old systems. They had stories. So did people. The vehicle door closed, the raven's wing vanished. And the hangar fell silent, not empty but thoughtful. Sometimes strength doesn't announce itself. Sometimes dignity doesn't argue. Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones who fix what's broken and walk away. Because real courage doesn't demand recognition. It simply acts. Why did she feel more exposed standing quietly in the hangar than she ever had under enemy fire? The first night at 29 Palms was louder than Alina expected, not with explosions or alarms, but with the restless noise of a base that never truly slept. Generators hummed. Distant engines coughed to life. Somewhere far beyond the perimeter, artillery thudded against the desert like a slow, angry heartbeat. Even in the small, temporary quarters assigned to her, the air felt tense, expectant, as if the ground itself knew something had arrived that didn't belong to peace. Alina lay on the narrow bed, eyes open, staring at a crack in the ceiling paint that resembled a branching fault line. She hadn't slept properly in years, but tonight was worse. Here, surrounded by uniforms, rank, ritual, everything she'd walked away from, her mind refused to settle. She closed her eyes anyway. And Kandahar answered. Sand, fire, the taste of metal and dust. The weight of a body slumped against her shoulder, breathing too shallow to last. Radios screaming half-words, orders breaking apart mid-sentence. She remembered the moment she'd made the choice, the one no report ever recorded. The one that saved a network, a mission, 100 lives, and destroyed everything else. Her eyes snapped open. Alina sat up slowly, grounding herself, hands steady, breath controlled. The scars along her arms itched faintly, an old sensation tied to memory, not injury. She rolled her sleeves down, a habit she rarely bothered with anymore, and stood. Outside, the hangar lights burned harsh and white. She walked there without thinking. Movement helped. Stillness invited ghosts. Inside the VTX-3 hangar, a skeleton crew worked the night shift. The mood had changed since the exercise. Voices were lower, laughter rarer. People glanced at her when they thought she wasn't looking, quick, uncertain looks, like they were trying to reconcile the woman from earlier with the quiet figure passing between workstations now. She ignored it. She always did. Alina stopped near the main drone, the one that had nearly gone down during the Cascade failure. Its fuselage bore old impact marks, cosmetic damage never worth fixing. She placed a hand against the cool metal, solid, reliable, honest in a way people rarely were. Machines didn't pretend. Lieutenant Parker spotted her from across the hangar. He hesitated before approaching, uncertainty written all over him. Earlier arrogance had burned away, replaced by something closer to embarrassment. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "we're reviewing the failure logs." Elena nodded. You won't find the root cause there. He swallowed. I figured. She met his eyes then. Not challenging, not forgiving, just present. That unsettled him more than anger would have. Tomorrow, she said, your squadron will be told this was a one-off anomaly, a stress test success. That narrative will protect people who need protecting. Parker frowned, and the truth. She looked back at the drone. The truth doesn't always make good headlines. Or good ghosts, she almost added, but didn't. She turned to leave. Parker watched her go, realizing too late that he'd been standing in the presence of someone who carried a weight no rank could match. The next morning, the base woke to rumors. Consultant wasn't the word people used anymore. Whispers moved faster than official explanations. A woman who'd fixed in minutes what a room full of experts couldn't. A general who'd gone quiet, too quiet after meeting her. A name that surfaced once, then disappeared just as quickly. Phantom. Elena heard it in passing, like an echo she didn't want to follow. She spent the day doing exactly what her assignment said. Diagnostics, integration, quiet observation. She corrected small things no one noticed, adjusted parameters that would prevent future failures, left no fingerprints behind. But eyes followed her now. Respect was there, so was curiosity, and something more dangerous, expectation. By late afternoon, Colonel Richards requested her presence again. His office felt smaller this time, less certain. He didn't sit immediately, neither did she. I owe you an apology, he said stiffly, as if the words tasted unfamiliar. Elena waited. I misjudged you, he continued. Your contribution yesterday was my job, she cut in, not unkindly. Richards paused, adjusted. General Hayes has questions. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course he does, she said. There it was, the knot she'd been avoiding since the salute. Recognition came with consequences. It always had. Richard studied her carefully now, seeing not just scars but restraint, control, something earned the hard way. He won't force anything, Richard said, but he remembers you. Elena let out a slow breath. That's the problem. The meeting with Hayes was scheduled for the following morning. Elena spent that night alone again, sitting on the edge of her bed, elbows on her knees, staring at her hands. They looked normal, ordinary. The same hands that had once rerouted entire enemy infrastructures from inside hostile territory. The same hands that had failed to save everyone. She flexed her fingers. Redemption was a word people liked. It implied balance, as if good deeds could cancel out bad outcomes. She didn't believe in that. She believed in responsibility. Morning came too quickly. The general's temporary command office overlooked the range. Hayes stood at the window when she entered, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn right away. Do you know how many times your name crossed my desk? He asked quietly. Elena said nothing. How many reports ended with the same line? He turned then. Status unresolved. She met his gaze. That was intentional. I know, he said. You disappeared. So others could stay, she replied. A beat passed, heavy, honest. Hayes gestured for her to sit. He didn't take the chair behind the desk. He sat across from her instead, soldier to soldier. You were declared dead for a reason, he said. But the world has changed. Threats are evolving. What you did yesterday, it wasn't luck. It was instinct. It was memory, Elena corrected, and memory cuts both ways. He nodded slowly. I won't ask you to come back. Her shoulders loosened slightly. But I will ask you to teach. There it was. Expectation. Elena looked down at her wrist, at the raven's wing, a symbol meant to remind her she survived when others didn't. I don't belong in classrooms, she said. Neither did half the legends we revere, Hayes replied, but they showed up anyway. She thought of the laughter at the gate, of the stunned silence in the command center, of Parker's uneasy respect, of a base full of young men and women who thought scars only came from failure. "I'm not a symbol," she said softly. Hayes leaned forward. "No," he agreed, "you're a warning." That made her smile, just barely. "I'll consider it," she said. Not yes, not no. Hope was dangerous, but so was walking away forever. As she left the office, Alina felt the weight shift, not lighter but different. Purpose didn't erase pain, it gave it direction. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, unforgiving, honest. She squared her shoulders and walked back into the noise. Somewhere behind her, the past followed. But for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like it was chasing her anymore. Why did agreeing to help feel heavier than any mission she'd ever accepted? Alina realized it the moment she stepped back into the hangar the next morning, not as a consultant drifting through the margins, but as someone people were now waiting for. Conversations dipped when she passed. Tools paused mid-motion. Eyes lifted, then quickly looked away, as if staring too long might turn respect into intrusion. She didn't like it. Being invisible had always been safer. She set her duffel down beside the same forgotten desk, though it no longer felt forgotten. Lieutenant Parker approached with a tablet in his hands, posture straighter than before, uncertainty replaced by a careful professionalism. "General Hayes authorized you full access," he said. "Training data, legacy systems, archived countermeasures, whatever you need." Alina nodded. "I'll need your people more than your files." Parker hesitated. "They'll listen." "That's what worries me," she replied. Listening created expectations. Expectations created responsibility. Responsibility had a way of digging into places scars couldn't cover. She started small, always did. Instead of lectures, she asked questions, simple ones, ones that made pilots uncomfortable. Why do you trust this system? What happens when it lies? What do you do when the screen goes dark and instinct is all you have left? Some answered quickly, too quickly. Others struggled, frustration tightening their jaws. She watched closely, not for right answers but for how they handled doubt. By midday, irritation surfaced. One pilot, young, gifted, overconfident, finally snapped. "With respect, ma'am, these systems are designed to adapt. We're not flying blind anymore." Alina studied him. "You ever been truly blind?" Silence. "Because when you are," she continued quietly, "technology doesn't save you. People do, and only if they've learned how to think without permission." That landed harder than she intended. The pilot looked away, jaw tight, not angry, embarrassed. Good, she thought. Embarrassment meant growth was possible. But inside, something twisted. She hated sounding like the people who trained her, hated hearing their voices echo in her own. Those instructors were ghosts now, some buried, some erased, some broken in quieter ways. She pushed the thought aside and refocused. The first real test came sooner than expected. A joint simulation with Cyber Command rolled out that afternoon, unscheduled, aggressive, designed to probe weaknesses, the kind of exercise meant to expose flaws before an enemy could. Alina felt the tension spike before the first alarm. She stood behind the operators this time, arms folded, eyes tracking not just data but behavior. Who froze, who compensated, who waited for orders instead of acting. The attack hit hard, multi-vector, layered deception. It was good, too good. A few minutes in, Alina leaned forward. "They're hurting you." No one heard her at first. "They want you to defend what doesn't matter," she said louder. "Stop chasing the noise." Parker relayed the command. The pilots adjusted, hesitant, then sharper. The simulation adapted again. Alina's pulse quickened, not from fear, from recognition. "This isn't doctrine," she muttered. Something old stirred, a pattern she hadn't seen since. The feed glitched. For half a second the room vanished. She was back in a concrete room overseas, blood pooling near a broken server rack, alarms screaming as the last clean exit closed behind her. She smelled smoke, heard someone say her name like it was already a goodbye. Alina clenched her fists until the memory fractured. "Ma'am," Parker's voice cut through, "what is it?" She swallowed, forced herself back into the present. "They're using human delay," she said, "predicting hesitation. You need to break pattern now." "How?" She exhaled slowly. "Do something wrong on purpose." The room hesitated, then trusted her. The maneuver worked. The simulation faltered. The attack collapsed under its own assumptions. When it ended, no one cheered. They just stared at her. Alina stepped back, heart pounding harder than she wanted to admit. Teaching wasn't passive. It pulled things out of her she'd buried for a reason. After the room cleared, she stayed behind, hands braced on the console, breathing through the aftershock. General Hayes entered quietly. "You recognized it," he said. "Yes." "You didn't tell them why." "No." He studied her for a long moment. "That attack signature, it matches Kandahar." There it was. The name felt like a blade pressed gently against old scar tissue, not cutting, but reminding. "That mission was a failure," Alina said flatly. Hayes shook his head. "It saved 3 others that day." "At a cost," she replied. "Someone always pays." She turned to face him. The general saw something raw in her expression now, cracks beneath the discipline. "I didn't disappear because I was broken," she said. "I disappeared because staying would have made me dangerous, to myself, to others." Hayes didn't argue. He understood too well. "You won't be forced to relive it," he said. Alina gave a humorless smile. "I already am." That evening she sat alone again, this time outside, on a concrete barrier overlooking the darkened range. The desert cooled quickly, heat bleeding away into a vast, starless sky. Corporal Martinez approached cautiously, stopping several steps away. He held 2 cups of bad coffee. "Figured you might need this," he said, setting one down and backing away. She nodded her thanks. They sat in silence for a while. "I used to think scars meant weakness," Martinez admitted quietly. "Like something went wrong." Alina watched the horizon. "Scars mean something happened," she said. "What matters is what you learned while it was happening." He absorbed that, then asked the question everyone wanted to but few dared. "Do they ever stop hurting?" She considered it, truly. "No," she said, "but they stop controlling you." When he left, Alina remained, staring at her wrist. The raven's wing caught faint light. She hadn't planned on staying long at 29 Palms, still wasn't sure she would. But something had shifted. These people didn't need a legend. They needed someone honest about fear, about failure, about the cost of surviving when others didn't. And for the first time since she vanished, Alina wondered if teaching wasn't a return to war, but a different way of ending it. The desert wind moved softly around her. She stayed seated. And didn't run. Why did the message marked priority? Eyes only make her chest tighten before she even opened it. Alina was halfway through reviewing archived flight telemetry when the secure tablet chimed. Not the soft administrative tone she'd grown used to, but the sharper, insistent sound reserved for things that refused to wait. She didn't touch it right away. Experience had taught her that urgency was often a trap, designed to pull you forward before you were ready. Still, she read it. A classified briefing request. Joint tasking. Real world not simulated. Limited disclosure. Requested by Cyber Command with oversight from Special Activities. The location was redacted. The timeline was not. 48 hours. Alina leaned back in her chair and stared at the hangar ceiling. The lights hummed faintly, steady and indifferent. Around her, the base moved on, maintenance crews, pilots, routines continuing like nothing had changed. But for her, everything had. She hadn't agreed to operations. Hayes had been clear, teaching, advising, staying in the margins where ghosts could exist without consequence. This was different. This was a door reopening, one she had welded shut with silence and distance. Her first instinct was simple. No. She closed the tablet and stood, packing once, twice, grounding herself in motion. Her pulse was elevated, not with fear exactly, but with something closer to grief. The kind that returned uninvited, wearing the face of unfinished responsibility. Lieutenant Parker noticed before she said anything. Something wrong. Alina shook her head, something familiar. That night she didn't sleep at all. She sat on the edge of her bed again, boots still on, tablet balanced in her hands. The briefing replayed in fragments. Anomalous system intrusions overseas, drones compromised without trace, operators locked out while feeds continued as if nothing were wrong. A ghost inside the machine. Her machine. The techniques were hers, not copied, evolved. That was what scared her. At dawn, she found General Hayes already awake, standing alone near the range, watching the sun claw its way over the desert. They reached out to you, he said without turning. Yes. You don't have to answer. I know. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. They're using my work, she said finally, or someone who learned from it. Hayes nodded, which means you understand it better than anyone alive. Alina closed her eyes briefly. Understanding had never felt like a gift. I won't deploy, she said, but I'll help you stop it. That was the compromise, a line drawn with care. Hayes accepted it without argument. By noon, the base felt different again, quieter, sharper. The knowledge that something real was happening traveled fast, even when details didn't. Alina noticed the way people watched her now, not with curiosity, but with concern, as if they sensed she was standing at the edge of something deep. She gathered a small team, not the best on paper, but the ones who listened. Parker, 2 cyber specialists, a drone pilot who'd failed his first evaluation and learned from it instead of hiding. She told them only what they needed to know. Assume the system is lying, she said. Assume the enemy is patient, and assume we don't get a second chance. The first live intrusion hit just after midnight. No alarms, no dramatic failure, just a subtle delay, milliseconds stretched where none should exist, a whisper instead of a scream. Alina felt it like a pressure change. Freeze, she said quietly. They did. She watched the data flows like a living thing, patterns overlapping, intentions hiding in plain sight. The code was elegant, restrained, confident. Too confident. They're testing us, Parker said. Yes, Alina replied, and they expect us to respond the way I taught. She felt the irony settle in her bones. Then we don't, she added. She made a decision that would have gotten her court-martialed in another life. She opened a channel she wasn't supposed to, exposed a fragment of false vulnerability, let the intruder step closer. Her team tensed. Trust me, she said, not loudly but with weight. The ghost took the bait. And Alina saw it clearly then, not just the how but the who. This wasn't a state actor, not exactly. It was someone who'd survived one of her operations, someone who'd watched systems collapse and decided to learn instead of surrender. A mirror. The realization hit harder than any explosion ever had. She shut the intrusion down cleanly. No trace, no retaliation, just a door quietly closed. When it was over, the room stayed silent. You could have destroyed them, Parker said. Yes, but you didn't. Alina folded her arms, feeling the old ache bloom beneath the scars. Because this isn't about winning, she said. It's about ending the cycle. Later, alone again, she stared at her wrist. The raven's wing, a symbol of survival, or maybe a reminder of consequences. She wondered how many others carried marks they never explained, how many were shaped by her choices in ways she'd never know. Redemption wasn't a finish line. It was maintenance. As dawn approached, Alina stepped outside. The desert air was cool, unforgiving, honest. She breathed deeply, letting it fill her lungs. She hadn't returned to war, but war had found her anyway. And this time, she intended to face it, not as a weapon, not as a ghost, but as someone willing to take responsibility for what she'd created. Sometimes healing doesn't come from hiding your past. Sometimes it comes from standing in its shadow and choosing, again and again, to do less harm than you did before. The sun rose higher. Alina didn't look away. Why did the silence after the intrusion feel more dangerous than the attack itself? Alina sensed it before anyone spoke it out loud, the subtle shift from relief to unease. Systems were stable, networks clean, reports filed with carefully chosen language. On paper, the night was a success, but beneath the calm, something had changed. She had been seen, not just by the enemy, by herself. The following days passed in a strange half-light. Alina continued training sessions, but her voice carried less distance now, more gravity. The pilots noticed. So did the analysts. She wasn't just teaching technique anymore, she was teaching restraint. When to stop, when not to pursue, when winning could cost more than losing. Some struggled with that. One afternoon, during a closed-door briefing, a senior cyber officer challenged her openly. "With respect," he said, arms crossed, "neutralizing a threat without eliminating it leaves the door open." Alina didn't bristle. She never did. She considered him for a moment, then asked quietly, "Do you lock every door by burning the building down?" A few people shifted uncomfortably. "There are enemies," the officer pressed, "who don't stop." Alina nodded. "And there are people who become enemies because no one ever stopped." The room fell silent, not because they agreed, but because they felt the weight behind her words. She wasn't theorizing, she was remembering. That night General Hayes called her in again. No ceremony, no aides, just 2 chairs and a shared understanding that time was thinning. "They responded," he said, indirectly. Alina didn't ask how, she already knew. "They mirrored our restraint," Hayes continued. "Pulled back, no counterstrike, no escalation." "Good," she said. Hayes studied her. "You sound disappointed." She met his gaze. "I sound tired." For the first time he saw it clearly. Not the legend, not the asset, the cost. "They want to talk," he said. Her breath caught despite herself. "Who, they?" "The intermediary," Hayes replied. "A channel that didn't exist yesterday." Alina stood and turned away, packing once. The room felt smaller now. "I don't do negotiations," she said. "This isn't a negotiation," Hayes replied carefully. "It's a reckoning." That word settled deep. The meeting happened 2 days later. Remote, encrypted. No cameras, just audio and a shared data space, sterile and impersonal. Alina insisted on being alone. No observers, no safety net. When the connection opened, she recognized the cadence immediately. The pauses, the restraint, the controlled calm hiding something raw beneath. "You taught me well," the voice said. Alina closed her eyes for half a second. "I taught you how to survive," she replied, "not how to become this." A quiet exhale on the other end. "You didn't teach mercy." "I didn't have any to give," she said. "Neither did you." Silence stretched, not hostile, reflective. "I lost people," the voice said finally, "because of you." Alina felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the old instinct to catalog names, faces, outcomes. "So did I," she said, "every time." Another pause, then softer. "I thought if I mastered your methods I could control the chaos." Alina leaned forward. "Control is the illusion that gets people killed." The data space flickered. Lines of code appeared, complex, elegant, restrained. proof of capability, a warning, or an offering. "I don't want a war," the voice said, "but I won't be hunted." "You won't be," Alina replied, "not by me. And if someone else comes—" "Then you decide who you become," she said, "not me." The channel closed without ceremony. Alina sat alone long after the signal died, hands folded, breathing slow. The scars on her arms felt warm, as if remembering. She hadn't forgiven, but she hadn't condemned either. When Hayes received her summary, he read it twice, then a third time. "This goes against doctrine," he said. "Yes." "It leaves uncertainty." "Yes." "And yet," he admitted quietly, "it may have prevented something worse." Alina didn't respond. She didn't need to. Word of the incident never reached the public. It was buried under layers of classification and careful omission. Officially, nothing happened. Unofficially, a line had been drawn and respected. The base began to return to its rhythm. Alina noticed changes she hadn't expected. Pilots asking questions they'd never asked before. Analysts challenging assumptions. Even laughter returning, quieter now, less cruel. One evening, she found Parker standing alone near the hangar doors, staring out at the desert. "You're leaving soon," he said. She nodded, "Yes." "Will we see you again?" She considered the question, not tactically but honestly. "I don't know," she said, "but you won't need me the way you did before." He smiled faintly. "That's probably the point." On her final morning, the base gathered, not formally, not announced, just people lingering longer than necessary. Alina moved through them with her duffel over her shoulder, acknowledging nods, brief words, shared understanding. At the gate, the same spot where laughter had once followed her scars, a young Marine stood at attention. He didn't speak. He didn't stare. He saluted. Alina returned it, clean, precise, unremarkable. As the vehicle pulled away, she watched the base recede into heat and dust. She felt no triumph, no closure, just a quiet sense of alignment. She had faced the consequences of her past without letting them define her future. That was enough. The road stretched ahead, empty and honest. Alina rested her head back and closed her eyes, not to escape memory, but to carry it with care. Because strength wasn't about being untouched. It was about choosing, again and again, what kind of mark you leave behind. And sometimes, the bravest thing a legend can do is refuse to become one again. Why did walking away feel harder now than surviving everything that had tried to kill her? The desert blurred past the window in long, heat-washed strokes of beige and rust. Alina watched it without really seeing it, the way you watched something familiar when your mind was busy rearranging itself. The base shrank in the distance until it was nothing more than a suggestion on the horizon, swallowed by dust and light. She expected relief. What she felt instead was quiet resistance, an ache that wasn't pain exactly, but gravity. The kind that formed when you'd finally stopped running and realized movement itself had become a choice, not an escape. For years, disappearance had been easy, necessary. She had learned how to vanish without drama, without footprints. No goodbyes, no explanations. Survival had demanded it. This time she'd been seen. That changed things. The transport dropped her at a small airstrip an hour later. No ceremony, no escorts, just a handshake from a logistics officer who didn't know her name and didn't ask. She liked that. Anonymity still fit her better than recognition ever would. Inside the terminal, the air was cool and smelled faintly of old coffee and floor cleaner. Ordinary. Civilian. She stood out more here than she ever had on base. Scars drew eyes. The way she moved drew others, subtle, instinctive, as if people sensed something in her posture that didn't belong to waiting rooms and departure boards. She found a seat near the window and set her duffel at her feet. And waited. Waiting used to be dangerous. Waiting meant exposure, ambush, loss of control. Now it felt like a test of something else, patience without vigilance, stillness without fear. Her tablet vibrated once. A message from Hayes, no orders, no requests. Just 4 words. You did good work. Alina stared at the screen longer than necessary. Praise had always felt foreign to her, like wearing someone else's uniform. She didn't reply. She powered the tablet down and slid it back into her bag. Some things didn't need answers. The flight lifted off as the sun tipped toward late afternoon. Alina watched the desert recede beneath them, the scars of old ranges and forgotten installations blending into the vastness. From this height, nothing looked broken. Everything looked quiet. She knew better. Somewhere over the mountains, the cabin lights dimmed. A child of few rose up, laughed softly at something on a screen. Someone else slept, mouth open, unguarded. Alina closed her eyes. Not to sleep. Just to breathe. She thought of the gate guards, the laughter, the careless cruelty that came from not knowing better. She thought of Parker, learning when to trust instinct instead of procedure. Of Martinez, asking questions that mattered more than answers. Of a voice on the other end of a secure channel, choosing restraint over revenge. Small shifts. That's how real change happened. Not with explosions or speeches, but with moments that asked you to be better than you were trained to be. The plane touched down as evening settled. Alina stepped into a city that didn't know her and didn't care. Neon lights, traffic, conversations overlapping in languages and tones that had nothing to do with rank or clearance. She rented a car, drove without a destination for a while, let the movement quiet the last of the tension still lodged between her shoulders. Eventually, she stopped near a low hill overlooking the city, parked, turned off the engine. The world hummed. She sat there as darkness deepened, stars faint against the glow. Her reflection stared back at her from the windshield, older than she felt, younger than she'd earned. The scars were still there. They always would be. For the first time, she didn't wish they were. They had kept her honest. Her tablet buzzed again. This time she answered. It was Parker. I won't keep you, he said quickly, like he was afraid she'd disappear mid-sentence. I just wanted you to know, we ran another exercise today. Different scenario, no scripts. And she asked. We didn't win, he admitted. But no one panicked, no one froze, we adapted. Alina smiled to herself. That's winning, she said. A pause. Thank you, he added, not formally, not reverently, just truthfully. After the call ended, Alina sat in silence for a long time. She thought about legacy. How people obsessed over it, tried to carve their names into history like permanence was something you could force. She had spent her life erasing hers, believing that was the only way to prevent harm. Maybe both instincts were wrong. Maybe legacy wasn't about being remembered or forgotten. Maybe it was about what kept moving after you left. She drove again, eventually finding a small motel on the edge of town. Nothing special, clean enough, quiet. She checked in under her real name without hesitation. No aliases, no ghosts. The clerk didn't look twice. In the room, Alina unpacked slowly, set the tablet on the desk, folded her clothes with care. When she reached the bottom of the duffel, her fingers brushed something familiar. She hesitated, then pulled it out. An old patch, faded, edges frayed, a symbol from a unit that officially never existed. She hadn't worn it in years, hadn't even looked at it. She turned it over in her hands, feeling the weight of memory embedded in cloth and thread. She didn't pin it up. She didn't throw it away either. She placed it in the drawer, closed it gently, and sat on the edge of the bed. Outside, a car passed. Someone laughed. Life continued, loud and unremarkable and stubbornly alive. Alina lay back and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in a long while, She wasn't listening for threats. She was listening for herself. Sleep came slowly, but it came. Morning arrived without urgency. Pale light through thin curtains, the sound of traffic starting its daily argument with time. Alina stretched, feeling stiffness ease, scars pull and settle like old joints in changing weather. She showered, dressed, looked at herself in the mirror. Same woman. Different weight. She checked out, left the key on the counter, and stepped back into the world. No one saluted. No one whispered. That felt right. As she walked toward the car, Alina caught sight of her reflection again, in glass, in metal, in passing windows. She didn't look away this time. She didn't flinch. She saw someone who had been ignored, mocked, misjudged. Someone who had broken systems and fixed them. Someone who had survived, not because she was invincible, but because she learned when to fight, when to adapt, and when to stop. She drove on. Not toward another mission. Not away from responsibility. Just forward. Because strength, she had learned, wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself with medals or myths or raised voices. It showed up quietly, did the work, took the cost, and left things a little less broken than it found them. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.